位朋友，大家好，我係 Michelle 朱曼舒，咁好歡迎大家咧收睇我哋今日嘅嘉賓嘅訪談嘅。嗱咁啊，眨下咧，我哋好快脆咧就係完成咗我哋嘅 RSP 啦。咁跟住咧，好多朋友咧亦都開始咧係要報稅㗎啦。咁喺報稅嘅時候咧，好多時咧，我哋喺公司方面嘅報稅咧，我哋咧有一啲嘅朋友咧就需要一啲稅務律師嘅幫助嘅。咁究竟有啲咩嘅朋友需要律師嘅幫忙咧？有啲咩可以幫到大家咧？嗱咁今日咧，我哋嘅節目咧好開心咧係請到咗稅務方面嘅大律師咧。係阿 George 啊，咁佢咧就上嚟接受我哋訪問，同你講下呢一方面咧可以幫到我哋啲咩嘢啦。Hi George, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, George. So first of all, can you tell us about your background?
Yes. After I did my law degree, I did my postgraduate studies in tax, and upon graduation, I worked at KPMG in international corporate tax. Then afterwards, I started my own firm that deals litigation on the civil and criminal side of tax and bankruptcy.
哦呀，咁其實咧 ，George 頭先都介紹咗啦。咁其實咧，佢以往咧，佢最主要係學呢個稅務方面嘅法律啦。咁亦都係亦都 concentrate 咧喺個 criminal 方面咧，佢亦都有好多呢一方面嘅經驗，亦都喺好多大嘅 accounting 嘅 firm 嗰度咧係做過呢方面工作啦。咁所以咧，佢喺稅務方面咧，亦都有非常之多嘅經驗可以幫到我哋一啲嘅客戶嘅。So George, so I just mentioned like the RSP contribution season just finished, right? So it's about the time for tax return, and then a lot of like the corporations, companies, and sometimes they need the tax lawyer to help them. So actually, so what you can help them?
Yeah, well, first of all, what happens, well, when you file your tax return, it'll go to CRA, and they'll do a quick calculation to see if the mathematics numbers behind it are correct. And then they'll send what's called a notice of reassessment.
Yeah， 咁冇錯啦。咁我哋初咧就係我哋譬如一啲嘅 corporation 啲公司咧，咁我哋報咗稅之後咧，政府咧首先咧就好似阿 George 講啦，就俾一封嘅信我哋咧係叫做 notice of assessment 嘅。咁呢入邊啲數字可能有時我哋唔係咁同意嘅喎。咁呢個時候咧，我諗咧亦都係時候咧請稅務方面嘅律師嚟幫下我哋啦。And then what?
And then as a result, at some point, your CRA has a particular way of randomly selecting tax returns to review them, or sometimes something may be materialized and they may specifically target your tax return for a review. So there's two types of further reviews. One, it's called a desk audit, where someone at CRA will get your tax return and may have some questions regarding some deductions or credits and may contact you to provide support and documents.
Yes. So, and sometimes, and if we don't agree this kind of report, and then what we are going to do?
Well, what happens if CRA, after they complete their audit, and you disagree with their assessment, CRA will send you what's called a notice of reassessment.
Okay.
And then you have within 90 days to file what's called a notice of objection. And a notice of objection is it basically enables you to explain to an appeals officer why the auditor was incorrect in the way they reassessed you.
So can we write this letter by ourselves, or we have to, hire the lawyer to do it?
Well, my personal opinion, because I spend a great amount of time in court, it's my personal opinion, it's better to get a professional in to write it, because there's an art to write it. Because if the matter eventually goes to the Tax Court of Canada or even higher, Federal Court of Appeal, the way you draft the notice of objection may, if it's not done properly, could hurt you at the Tax Court of Canada, because the judge will make certain findings on what you said, and those findings may be to your detriment.
咁原來咧就如果係我哋唔同意稅局方面俾我哋一啲嘅 report 咧，咁我哋可以點做咧？咁頭先阿 George 都講啦，咁最好咧我哋就請專業嘅律師咧就幫我哋寫一個嘅係 notice of objection， 即係話我哋係唔同意嘅。咁唔同意咧喺90日之內咧，你可以係寫呢一封嘅信咧係俾翻稅局㗎。咁然之後咧，咁亦都即係稅務嘅律師方面咧，亦都可以咧幫你係進一步咧係做其他方面嘅一啲嘅工作㗎啦。
And what happens if it went to the Tax Court of Canada and you disagree with the judge's ruling, then you're entitled to file another appeal to the Federal Court of Appeal, and that will be before 3 judges.
咁亦都係，如果係律師方面咧，亦都可以咧同即係話係進一步咧去到法庭啊嚇，咁亦都係同你申請點樣可以係將你一啲唔啱嘅數字，即係代表你咧係可以同佢咧就再進行一次嘅 argue 嘅。
And what's very important, going back to the notice of objection, is since I spend a considerable amount of time in court, you know what the court is looking for. And as a result, it assists you in writing a proper notice of objection, because the judges at the Tax Court of Canada make inferences from what you say. In other words, if you don't have a plausible or reasonable explanation that's not supported by documents, that could hurt you.
Yeah. And 亦都係咧，其實咧頭先都講到個重要性咧，點解我哋要請呢一個嘅稅務方面嘅律師咧 ？So George, I want to know, so after the auditor, they audit.
Right.
And then sometimes we heard about like civil and criminal. So what's the difference for that?
Well, I'll give you an example. Just say you're owner of a restaurant and the auditor's looking through your books and records. And they, for example, the one mechanism they could use to audit you is called a bank deposit analysis. So, for example, if they're going through your bank statements and just say bank statements show deposits over a year of just say $300,000, but on your tax return you're showing a federal tax payable of $200,000, they'll say, wait a second, there's a discrepancy of $100,000.
Yes.
At that point, the auditor can, not always, but can make a referral to what's called enforcement. Enforcement division in CRA, they're the ones who determine if they're going to continue with your file and make a recommendation to the government to charge you criminally for tax evasion or GST fraud.
Really? It's quite serious 咧。所以咧，有啲朋友咧就覺得係以為報稅咧，淨係呢個錢銀方面一啲數字啫，冇即係我哋未俾咪補翻俾啦。原來咧佢可以嚴重到咧，就有時個 auditor 咧可以係判斷你咧，如果係數額係爭得咁遠嘅時候咧，佢可以係當咗你係刑事嘅，就到時睇下個情況，佢可以判你係刑事啊，或者係唔係刑事咁，所以咧都一個好嚴重嘅問題嚟嘅稅務方面。
Generally speaking, if they're doing what's called a compliant audit, just verifying your tax liability, CRA has very broad tools or powers to look at your books and records and ask you for further information.
Yeah, of course. 咁啊，亦都係政府方面咧，佢亦都有權咧，就係要求你係俾更多嘅資料咧，俾到佢哋去審核嘅。And but so what's the difference between if you hire a tax lawyer and then the customer have the conversation with the lawyer and have the conversation with the accountant?
Well, the accountant, either a small A accountant who does not have a designation, or an accountant who does have a designation like CGA or CA, any conversation you have with your accountant and any working papers, any documents they create and working with you is not privileged. Now, if they work with a lawyer, generally speaking, that's privileged communication. But there are cases where Revenue Canada may want to look at the documents that are in the possession of a lawyer because they do not feel it's privileged. Then what happens that then the matter has to go to the federal court and for a judge to look at the lawyer's documents to determine if it's privileged or not. But the vast majority of the time, any documents that go before a lawyer is privileged. For example, matters of financial matters, business decisions, that's generally not protected under client solicitor privilege. But everything else is.
OK， 咁如果咧我哋選擇咧，如果係請一個嘅稅務律師方面啊，咁我哋如果同係個客戶咧同稅務律師方面嘅談話咧，咁咧大部分咧都係受到保護嘅。咁但係如果個分別咧就如果你係同個 accountant 之間嘅對話咧，咁其實咧就100%咧都唔可以係受到保護嘅。咁啊政府咧係有權咧將你100%咧你同個 accountant 嘅對話咧係會係攞出嚟係抽查嘅，咁所以亦都係一個好大嘅 difference 啊。So for some kind of case, if some client they probably if you think they might be bankruptcy or something, and then what's your suggestion for your client?
Well, here's what happens in this case. A lot of people do not realize there's an overlap between the Bankruptcy Insolvency Act and tax law. And sometimes clients will consider, instead of fighting CRA, is to either do what's called a consumer proposal or bankruptcy. as a result, these are questions they're asking me all the time, and I'm very familiar. But I have a strong working relationship with a particular trustee, Kathy Chan, and she works for a large trustee insolvency firm called A. Farber and Associates. They are trustees in bankruptcies like myself. They're officer of the court. So sometimes it's in your best interest to speak to a trustee in bankruptcy to assist you on your matters.
OK， 咁如果阿 George 咧就有一啲嘅客戶咧，如果佢哋佢覺得咧即係個情況都比較嚴重咧，亦都係可能需要係呢個破產方面嘅信託嘅師嚟幫佢咧，咁佢亦都將一啲嘅客人咧就 refer 俾一啲嘅政府註冊嘅破產信託師嘅。咁嗱喺下一節嘅訪問咧，我哋將會訪問一位女士係叫做 Catherine 咧，佢亦都係呢方面嘅專業人士啦。So if our audience have some problems or questions, want to contact you, so what's your phone number?
Oh, my phone number is as follows: 416-661-8600. 416-661-8600.
OK， 咁今日咧好多謝阿 George 咧上嚟咧係接受我哋訪問。咁大家有啲咩問題，亦都喺熒光幕嗰度咧見到佢哋嘅電話號碼啦，同埋係地址咧，可以直接咧揾阿 George 咧係去 consult 一啲嘅 questions 嘅。Thank you so much, George.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.